Join host Bert Convey on Tattletales tonight, 7:30.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. The Justice Department said today that the late J. Edgar Hoover and other top FBI officials systematically misused funds and employees of the Bureau for their own benefit. Jim McManus has that report.
For 11 months last year, a special team of investigators headed by Justice Department lawyers dug deep into J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. They found that Hoover, his close friend and aide Clyde Tolson, and other top FBI officials had abused their official positions and neglected their responsibilities. It started at the top. Investigators report that Hoover, a lifelong bachelor, used FBI craftsmen and government materials to avoid the trials of the average homeowner. They were supposed to be building exhibits for court trials, but FBI workers instead painted J. Edgar Hoover's home. They built a front portico and a rear deck on the house, serviced wiring and home appliances, replaced the entire lawn twice a year, set Hoover's clocks, polished the brass, and rearranged the furniture. And they did it all for nothing, because the report says they were afraid of losing their jobs. The report says Associate Director Tolson had FBI workers develop several patented devices, including a power window opener. One of those went to President Johnson's White House. Other misconduct charges are detailed against former Assistant Director John Moore, former Assistant Director Nicholas Callahan, who resigned last year at the Justice Department's request, and the report notes that current Director Clarence Kelly received goods and services but later reimbursed the FBI. Attorney General Griffin Bell said the misconduct of Hoover and some of his top aides has cast a shadow over the FBI. In a National Press Club appearance, Bell declined comment on the report, but he said he sees a new day when government officials are presumed to be honest.
I believe that we are reaching the end of the Watergate syndrome. I believe that the confidence of the American people has been restored in their government, and that they are now willing to give those in government an opportunity to perform as public servants in the traditional sense.
The Justice Department plans no criminal or civil actions against the surviving former FBI officials. The report says the statute of limitations may have expired, and the amounts of money involved are small compared to legal costs. Attorney General Bell said Director Kelly has taken steps to see that the misconduct does not happen again. Jim McManus, CBS News, Washington.
Attorney General Bell told a House hearing that since he took office a year ago, no American has been wiretapped for national security purposes. No warrants required now for such wiretapping, but both Bell and CIA Director Turner endorsed legislation that would require a warrant.
This is the world's first diesel V8 in a passenger car. Only Olds offers it, and look at this mileage. Here's the new Olds Delta 88, a full-size family car. The new Olds Custom Cruiser Wagon, and the 98 Regency, a fine luxury car. Each is available with a diesel V8. So now, the car you want, the economy you need, and only at your Olds dealer. Can we build one for you?
When occasional itching, irritation, or discomfort from hemorrhoids is a problem,
try Tux pre-moistened pads. Tux are soft, hygienic pads that offer soothing, cooling, temporary relief.
Don't hospitals use Tux?
Tux are used in over 2,500 of the nation's hospitals.
Where can I get Tux?
At your pharmacy.
Tux pre-moistened pads for itching, irritation, or hemorrhoids.
Soothing, cooling, hygienic relief from Park Davis.
It was cold all across the country today. Temperatures dipped below zero in the Plain States, and readings sank into the teens in Alabama. But hardest hit were those northeastern areas that suffered so last year. Upper New York State and Pennsylvania, for instance, or Ohio, where 10 deaths were blamed on the cold and 5 utilities had to cut back power. We have 2 reports, starting with Jackie Castleberry in Cleveland.
The biggest problem caused by the paralyzing snow and cold was stalled cars. The National Guard had its hands full with hundreds of abandoned vehicles stopped along Cleveland's major highways. Some roads remained closed during the day, including those leading to Cleveland's airport. Travelers have been stranded since Sunday, some lucky enough to find hotel rooms, but others were forced to camp out in the terminals. The biting cold, intensified by high winds, caused problems for utilities. The companies ordered industrial power cutbacks and asked residential customers to conserve fuel. Despite the nationwide coal strike, utilities reported adequate supplies, even though hard frozen piles of coal caused some generators to shut down. But state officials cautioned that the problems for natural gas customers are far less serious than those which caused wholesale industrial shutdowns in Ohio last year. Cleveland schools were also closed for the second day, but for the average citizen, the biggest problem was moving between work and home, with travel time triple that of normal. But there is some good news. Weather officials are saying the worst is over for Ohio, for now. Jackie Castleberry, CBS News, Cleveland, Ohio.
The Buffalo International Airport was officially open today, but it might just as well have been closed. There were crosswinds reported hitting 60 miles an hour, and most airlines were canceling flights all day long, leaving many travelers stranded. Temperatures were down near zero, but it was the wind that really caused the greatest difficulty. Snow drifted up and forced traffic to a crawl. Just walking in Buffalo and other cities in northern New York State became a major project. Winds around these cities routinely reached 40 miles an hour. New York State Police closed some 58 miles of the New York Thruway between Buffalo and Rochester. Police set up roadblocks at both ends of the section considered most dangerous because of drifting snow, ice, and high winds. The combination of low temperatures and high winds brought the wind chill factor so low that one Eastern Weather Service official warned people who have to go outside to dress as though your life depends on it. David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
A year ago, a man named John Adamson pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the 1976 car bomb killing of reporter Don Bolles. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but Adamson implicated two others in the crime. They were convicted of first-degree murder in November, and today a judge imposed sentence. Mike Arra of station KOOL-TV in Phoenix reports.
Defendants Max Dunlap and Jimmy Robison and their attorneys stood before Judge Howard Thompson, heads bowed, hands clenched. Judge Thompson, this court has found you guilty of the crimes committed in the death of Don Bolles. It has found no mitigating circumstances. Do you have anything to say? Dunlap, obviously straining to keep from breaking down, again proclaimed his innocence. He quoted words he had written to one of his daughters. I don't want you to feel bitter because this trial has not been representative of justice. Your Honor, you have the power to take my life, my freedom, but not my free spirit. Robison, tragedy is not being done to me, but to the people of Arizona. This trial will now serve as an excuse not to get to the people who are guilty of the murder of Don Bolles. Judge Thompson then pronounced sentence. For the murder of Don Bolles, the punishment of death by lethal gas. For conspiracy to murder, a prison sentence of not less than 29 years. Max Dunlap spoke with newsmen following the sentencing.
We were expecting it. There hasn't been anything, as far as I'm concerned, fair in any part of the trial, so I was basically prepared for what he came forth with.
The convictions of Max Dunlap and James Robison have automatically been appealed by Arizona law. Mike Arra for CBS News, Phoenix.
Do you want to lose weight and still have a good, nourishing dinner every day? Now you can, with new PVM. The PVM diet plan limits and controls your calorie intake. And PVM powder with the diet gives you high protein, vitamins, and minerals for balanced nutrition. You mix PVM powder with orange juice for breakfast and with low-fat milk for lunch. And the plan includes menus for full-course meals like this. For dinner, the PVM plan. Start today, and this time you'll really lose weight.
Listen to this letter from Mr. and Mrs. Edward Helene. Gentlemen, we had a fire in our laundry room at 3:30 a.m. Our first alert smoke detector saved our lives and the lives of our children. We would hate to think what would have happened without First Alert. The Helenes put their trust in First Alert, the smoke detector made by professionals, and it saved their lives. First Alert. This sound could save your life.
With tough bargaining about to begin anew in the Egyptian-Israeli peace negotiations, it's difficult to separate rhetoric from real policy. But a vow by Israel's immigration minister today to never give up the Jewish settlements in the occupied Sinai threatens to complicate the talks. Still, as Bruno Wasserteil reports from Tel Aviv, a compromise might be in the works.
In Jerusalem, Cairo, and Washington, the reports were becoming persistent that Israel and Egypt were working out an exchange of territory to reach an equitable agreement in the Sinai, an exchange that would give Egypt part of Israel's Negev region and Israel those areas of the Sinai where Jewish settlements now exist. But Prime Minister Begin insisted that it just wasn't so.
There is no basis whatsoever to that rumor. And there was another rumor that the Prime Minister of Egypt said that Egypt may ask for what he termed compensation from Israel for the use of oil at an amount of more than $2 billion. We didn't receive such a demand from the Egyptian government, but it should be clear that if one side asks for compensation, there will be counterclaims by Israel.
It's believed that Begin might counter by presenting Egypt with a much higher bill for maintaining the Sinai Peninsula for the last decade. Menachem Begin's settlement policy won a vote of approval today in the Knesset's powerful Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. By a vote of 14-9, it okayed plans for the establishment of 3 more Jewish settlements on the West Bank within the next 3 months. The settlement issue continues to be a major sore point between Cairo and Jerusalem, but it's not slowing the peacemaking momentum. An advance party of Egyptians landed at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport and went straight off to Jerusalem to prepare for next Monday's Egyptian-Israeli Foreign Ministers Conference. The atmosphere in Israel is hardly as euphoric as it was during the heyday of President Sadat's visit here, but it's certainly more hopeful of peace than fearful of a new Middle East war. Bruno Wasserteil for CBS News, Tel Aviv.
A meeting of the Egyptian and Israeli defense ministers was scheduled to begin in Cairo at the same time as the foreign ministers' meeting in Jerusalem. But reportedly, because of Israel's stepped-up hardline policy on Sinai settlements, Egypt requested that the Cairo meeting be pushed forward to tomorrow. More on that from John Sheehan in Aswan.
With one set of peace negotiations opening tomorrow between the Egyptian and Israeli defense ministers, tensions still seem to be rising over the issue of Israeli settlements in the Sinai. Israel says the Jewish settlements must remain in Egypt even after peace. Egypt says the settlements must go. With television cameras present, President Sadat told 2 visiting British members of parliament that Israel has to choose whether it wants to have peace or not.
The choice now is this. Peace or land. It's quite simple like this. Peace, we are ready for peace. Security measures for them, yes. I recognize the fact that they need to be secured and safe, but not on the expense of others' land.
Earlier, the Shah of Iran concluded his visit to Egypt with a strong endorsement of Sadat's peace initiative.
I think that the ball now is on the other side. Egypt has opened her hand in a very dignified and very manly manner.
The Shah pledged to support Sadat personally on a visit to Saudi Arabia and to mount a worldwide diplomatic campaign on behalf of Egypt. Public expressions of support might help Sadat fend off his critics for the moment, but what he needs to vindicate himself are concrete results in the negotiations. The public squabbling over Jewish settlement seems to be an indication that an agreement, especially an agreement Sadat can sell to the Arab world, is a long way off. John Sheehan, CBS News, Aswan.
Sadat, apparently concerned over the talks bogging down, is arranging a private meeting at Aswan with Israeli Defense Minister Weissman during the Cairo talks. 2 Soviet cosmonauts have been circling the Earth for the past 30 days after docking their spacecraft with an orbiting Salyut laboratory. And today, the Soviet Union sent 2 more cosmonauts aloft to join them in an historic double link-up. The 2 newest spacemen plan to guide their Soyuz craft toward the docking tomorrow, about 24 hours after the launch from Soviet Central Asia. American space officials today released a picture of the Earth and the Moon taken by one of the 2 unmanned Voyager probes on their way to Jupiter. The picture of Eastern Asia, the Western Pacific, and parts of the Arctic was taken in September when the Voyager was 7 million miles above Mount Everest. The 2 Voyager space probes sent aloft last summer are due to reach Jupiter in 1979.
Am I lucky? I have a normal, healthy American family. There they are. When we have a health problem, like occasional constipation, we like to do something about it. We take something gentle, X-Lax. We know it's safe. We take it just the way it says to. We learned years ago that X-Lax works gently. So when we need it, we take X-Lax. Don't you?
Dependable X-Lax, the laxative medicine.
Aerosol. Not an economical way to apply deodorant. In fact, you'd use up this 4-ounce can of the leading aerosol, buy another, use it up, buy a third, use it up, before you'd use up 1 2.5-ounce Speed Stick. Men and Speed Stick is solid deodorant, an even, effective layer of protection you apply directly. Nothing's wasted. That's why 3 million more Americans took our advice. They got off the can, they got on the stick.
The United States and South Korea signed a formal agreement today, clearing the way for questioning in the United States of Korean businessman Tongsun Park. Park's under indictment here in connection with the Capitol Hill bribery scandal. And at the Pentagon, Ike Pappas has learned that the scandal could delay the start of the planned withdrawal of U.S. troops in South Korea from this fall to December or even later. Pentagon officials fear that Congress might be reluctant to appropriate substitute funds for Korean defense until the scandal investigation is over. Tomorrow, HEW Secretary Califano will announce an extensive campaign to persuade people to stop smoking. But the tobacco industry is not waiting for details. It struck back today. We have 2 reports, starting with Barry Seraphin in Washington.
In an unusual move, the Tobacco Institute, which represents cigarette manufacturers, called a news conference to respond to an announcement Califano has not even made yet. Officials of the trade association portrayed Califano's planned anti-smoking campaign as the product of a reformed smokers' prohibitionist mentality.
He's entitled to his views on the alleged hazards of tobacco. He's entitled to voice those views and use whatever may be his powers of personal and private persuasion in attempts to enlist smokers to join him among the ranks of the reform, the former 3-pack-a-day smoker, the current Secretary of HEW. Free will, free choice, and free speech guarantee those rights to all. However, the title of Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare does not confer an entitlement to use public powers in pursuit of a private hobby.
As they have in the past, the tobacco representatives argue that there is no conclusive evidence that smoking is hazardous to health.
One of the things you must realize is that among the causes of death that are listed on a death certificate, cigarette smoking is not one.
Secretary Califano, in effect, will answer the tobacco industry when he announces his anti-smoking campaign tomorrow, the 14th anniversary of the Surgeon General's report on smoking. He will call for smoking education and prevention and probably a new Surgeon General's report. There's likely to be emphasis on discouraging teenage smoking, one issue with which the Tobacco Institute says it has no quarrel. Barry Seraphin, CBS News, Washington.
Laura Blackstock started smoking as a teenager. Now she's a young adult and still smoking.
I mean, listen to my voice. I got laryngitis right now because I smoke too much. My father died of emphysema, my mother had lung cancer, and I smoke. I'm an idiot.
Cigarette smokers are a minority among Americans, and their number is declining. Since 1970, the proportion of adult Americans, male and female, who smoke cigarettes has fallen slightly. But there has been a small overall increase in smoking among women in their early 20s. And most alarming to the opponents of smoking, there has been an increase of 500,000 in the number of teenage girls who smoke. There are more teenage girls who smoke a pack a day than there are boys.
Because I like it. I like cigarettes.
Do you believe it's bad for your health?
Yes, but it relaxes me, and I choose to take those consequences.
Smoking among young females is of great concern to anti-smoking forces, the American Cancer Society among them.
Part of it has to do with a feeling of self-confidence if they have a cigarette, a feeling that the members of the peer group, they do feel the pressure of that peer group. And I'm sure that part of it's also an anti-authority or rebelliousness you'll find that many of the teenage smokers are doing the things that they're sure their parents just don't want them to do.
The American Cancer Society says there's a direct link between smoking and lung cancer. 4 out of 5 cases of lung cancer, they say, are caused by smoking. Lung cancer is now the #2 cancer killer among women. Breast cancer still leads, but lung cancer, which is much more difficult to diagnose early, is narrowing the gap. The Cancer Society has a grim prediction. If the smoking trend continues, lung cancer one day will kill more American women than cancer of the breast does today. Richard Wagner, CBS News, New York.
A storage tank in an oil distribution complex in Hertford, North Carolina exploded this morning, setting fire to 10 other tanks holding almost 200,000 gallons of fuel. Residents were evacuated from nearby homes and there were no injuries. Firemen from a dozen neighboring towns fought the blaze. They were joined by the Coast Guard when flaming fuel leaked into a river. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously today that a father who does not establish paternity of his illegitimate child or show interest in the child's development has no right to block the child's adoption. The court also heard argument today in the case of a girl who was sterilized on a judge's order without her knowledge. Fred Graham reports.
7 years ago, when Linda Kay Spittler was 15 years old, her mother became concerned that Linda might become pregnant. Her mother said that Linda was staying out at night with men and that she had suffered some brain damage at birth and could not care for a child. Her mother had a lawyer draw up a petition to have Linda sterilized. She took it to the courthouse where Indiana State Judge Harold Stump approved the sterilization. And at the county hospital, the operation was performed. Linda married Leo Sparkman 2 years later, still believing that the operation had been to remove her appendix.
When did you first begin to suspect that you'd been sterilized?
Well, it was after me and Leo got married. I mean, I kept wondering why I couldn't get pregnant, and finally I called her up, and she told me that my tubes are tied, but they will come untied, and I believed her.
And so what did you do?
Well, it never did happen, so I called her, and she started crying on the phone, and we both cried, and she just told me she had to do it.
What was her real reason, as best you know?
She says I'm retarded.
What effect did it have on the marriage of the two of you?
It hurt us a lot.
In what way?
We filed for divorce once.
Well, I did it to protect her because Linda is not capable of taking care of herself, let alone any little child. She tries to babysit. They never have her back twice. Why?
Would you do it again if you had
Yes,
a divorce?
yes.
Linda and Leo sued everyone involved, and today the case was argued in the Supreme Court on the sole question of whether the justices should change the long-standing law that gives judges an absolute privilege against all suits growing out of their decisions. If Linda Sparkman and her husband win, it will have two important results beyond their own lives. The practice of sterilizing people without their consent will greatly diminish across the country, and judges across the nation will become subject to paying damages if they act beyond the law. Fred Graham, CBS News, Kendallville, Indiana.
A federal judge in Dayton, Ohio has ruled that high school girls must be allowed to compete alongside boys in all athletic activities, including contact sports. The judge cited the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution in ruling in favor of 2 girls who sued to get on a boys' basketball team. The defendant, the Ohio High School Athletic Association, has not yet decided whether to appeal. Although the case concerned only Ohio schools, the federal judge said its effect would be nationwide. 5 officers of one of the nation's largest commodities options firms, Lloyd Carr and Company, were arrested today by federal marshals on charges of violating the December court order prohibiting fraudulent sales. Bail for the 5, which included company president James A. Carr, ranged up to $100,000. Despite what many stores described as a wild holiday shopping spree, nationwide retail sales actually declined last month for the first time since June. But they were down by just 0.7%, and largely because of poor sales of building materials, hardware, and mobile homes. On the whole, last year was good for retailers. Their sales were 10% above 1976. The Dow Jones Industrial Average sagged again today, this time by about 3 points. Volume on the New York Stock Exchange, 25,200,000 shares. The average price per share dipped 16 cents on the New York Exchange, 9 cents on the American.
Soft, soft, squeezably soft, bouncy soft. Bath tissue should be soft. Coronet bath tissue is soft, but strong, and that's what the world needs, to be soft yet strong. With quilted two-ply Coronet prints, you get soft strength and a great design. Coronet prints, the bath tissue that's always soft, never flimsy, and now prettier than ever.
For the millions of people who need a full-size car, introducing the 1978 Ford LTD. If you need 6-passenger space, if you need a roomy trunk, if you want mileage like this, then the full-size 1978 Ford LTD could be just the car for you. LTD, a better idea from Ford.
The price of housing has been going up at near astronomical rates lately, but Christie's auction house in London fetched a price for a piece of property today that boggles the mind. Bob McNamara has the story.
12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 6 feet high, Titania's palace is 16 rooms, more than 2,000 miniature furnishings, tiny works of art, and all of it heated and lighted by electricity. The lavish Dollhouse was built 60 years ago by a British artist and author who gave it to his 3-year-old daughter. The house had been sold before at auction for more than $75,000, but today bidders expected the price to be close to $130,000.
100,000, 105,000.
The bidding started at $95,000, and within 2.5 minutes, the value of the real estate shot up rapidly.
£135,000.
At today's exchange rates, £135,000 is over $255,000. As usually happens, the highest bidder was an agent representing an anonymous client. But it was disclosed that Dollhouse will go on exhibition somewhere in Europe. The agent promised that when the owner is known, everyone will be pleased, and whoever he is, he's rich. Bob McNamara, CBS News, London.
And that's the way it is. Tuesday, January 10th, 1978. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Billings, Montana. A car crashed into a showroom owned by baseball great Dave McNally. He called Pete Hoynes, his key agent of the home insurance company. Within minutes, the car was removed, the premises cleared, and the showroom secured for the night. The next morning, Pete Hoynes had Dave McNally back in business. Your home key agent on the spot when you're on the spot.
You get something extra service, your home key agent cares.
Why do I take Geritol? I'll give you one very good reason. Me.
Taking Geritol just makes good sense. I wouldn't do without it.
It wasn't long ago that a good friend said, why don't you start taking Geritol? Meet my good friend.
Geritol, to be sure you get enough iron, more than twice the iron of any ordinary supplement, and some very important vitamins. Take a look at people who take Geritol. Geritol every day.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. For the latest news early, watch the CBS Morning News with Richard Threlkeld and Leslie Stahl. Klinger's really done it this time. He's lost Hot Lips' wedding ring. Don't miss the fireworks on MASH tonight at 9, 8 Central and Mountain, here on CBS.